President Hyslop, members of the Council, President Curtin and members of the Board of Education, members of the administrative staff, Clerk Karen, distinguished guests, and my fellow New Londoners. After a difficult winter, standing tonight on the threshold of spring, I am called upon again to report to you on the state of our city. I am reminded in this moment that spring can bring new hope, an opportunity for new life. For our city, opportunities abound, but so too do challenges. As a city, we are on the brink of capitalizing on some of the most exciting opportunities our city has ever seen. And yet, in order to realize the potential of these opportunities, we need to extricate ourselves from a very real and a very grave financial peril. First, however, the good news, and there is a lot of it. Although much of it isn't visible, New London is going through a period of significant economic development. Kyle Cluin, the developer for Parcel J, the lot on the corner of Bank and Howard Streets, expects to break ground on a major project this fall. After 41 years of vacancy and neglect, instead of a lawn full of Canadian geese, we're going to have a downtown supermarket, which will support downtown living, and approximately 40 high-quality apartments. In the streets behind Harbor Towers, gas bars, and Devs on Bank Street, Tony Silvestri's City Flats project is well underway. By preserving historic homes and converting them into reasonably priced condominiums, City Flats is stabilizing a neighborhood and helping families move into home ownership. Owner-occupied housing, people living downtown, is key to the economic revitalization of our central business district. The City Flats project and the Parcel J development serve as models for how this revitalization can be achieved. The Create Here Now project is also underway, bringing at least 8 new stores to downtown by next January. This project, spearheaded by Anna Perch of New London Main Street and Special Advisor Margaret Bodell, is not only attracting new businesses to open their doors, but is also providing ongoing mentoring to help those businesses succeed. Regarding development in the south end of the city, bids will be opened on May 28th for the sale of the Lighthouse Inn. If a responsible developer is identified, we can save the Lighthouse Inn and reverse the sad trend our city has had in the past of tearing down our architectural treasures. On the Waterford border in our city, Mike's Harley-Davidson is open on Boston Post Road. Downtown, Mambo's has expanded into a great new space. Cruise ships are returning to the Port of New London this summer, and when they arrive, their passengers will be able to take Segway tours of historic sites downtown. Thanks to State Senator Andrew Maynard, a state pilot program will institute a water taxi service on the Thames River by September. This service will further expand historic tourism. Historic tourism is recognized by urban planners as a principal economic driver in the Northeast. In East New London as well, residents of Hodges Square are planning improvements to their neighborhood. With broad community partnerships, including a closer working relationship with Connecticut College and the Coast Guard Academy, our city has the real opportunity for the first time in decades to make a significant impact on the redevelopment of Hodges Square, a key connective neighborhood for our city that cannot be overlooked any longer. Perhaps most significantly, step by step, we are working towards bringing the National Coast Guard Museum to our downtown. This museum will attract hundreds of thousands of visitors annually to our city. 1 month from tomorrow, on May 2nd, I will be proud to transfer the deed to the land on which this museum will be built on behalf of the people of our city to the United States Coast Guard. Now, while the Coast Guard Museum is a great achievement for our city, other community efforts this past year are also deeply significant in their own right. Last year, hundreds of volunteers came together to build Emily's Shady Spot in Riverside Park. This playscape will bring joy to countless children while serving as a permanent memorial to the life of Emily Parker. The entire city thanks all of those who made this possible and who have done so much to remember Emily and to bring comfort to her family. But the most important news in our city for our children and for our city as a whole pertains to our schools. This past year, the Board of Education approved a strategic operating plan which outlines the conversion of our system to the first all-magnet regional school district in our state. Once this conversion is complete, I believe New London schools will give each of our students an education tailored to their interests and needs, and I believe our schools will be funded in a way which rectifies many of the inequities and inequalities in our property tax system. This will make our schools the envy of every other district, not only in our state, but in the entire country. I can also report tonight to the Council and to the community that conversations are now taking place between the city and state government at the highest levels regarding the future of Fort Trumbull. I hope to be able to make an important announcement regarding the status of development on the peninsula shortly. So why? With such good news, do I find it difficult to stand before you tonight as your mayor? In short, because quite simply, I am not from here. I love our city. New London is my home. In so many ways, the only true home of my own that I've ever known. I'll spend the rest of my life in New London, but I didn't grow up in our neighborhoods. I didn't lifeguard at Ocean Beach. I didn't graduate from New London High or from St. Bernard's. I love New London as much or more than anyone, but unlike my husband, I'm not originally from here. I wish tonight that I was, because what I have to say next would be easier for you to hear, I believe, if it came from a native New Londoner known to you their entire lives. What I say to you now, I say out of love for our city and genuine concern for its future, and it is simply this. We are out of money, and we are out of time. Understand, we will not be running an annual operating deficit this year. I will do whatever it takes to balance this year's budget and use all legal authority within my power to do so, as I balanced last year's operating budget. But with no wiggle room, with no contingency in our city's general cash flows, it is not enough to balance the budget by year's end. We need to balance it every 2 weeks if we're going to meet payroll. A balanced budget is only half the solution to our financial problems. We need a fund balance to stabilize city operations. I have been saying this for 2 years, but now at last time is running out. Even with a balanced budget, according to our professional financial staff, if we do not stabilize cash flow and replenish fund balance, we could run out of cash in May and face the possibility of a takeover by the state. This would be a disaster for the city, one that I have worked tirelessly for 2 years to avoid, ever since the financial condition of our city was revealed in January of 2012. In the past 2 years, we have raised taxes, slashed spending, cut staff, examined asset and property sales to gain revenue, proposed a highly unpopular supplemental tax bill, lobbied the state for additional revenue, asked for voluntary contributions from nonprofits in our city. In short, we have exhausted every option to replenish fund balance and permanently stabilize the city's cash flows. It's hard for me to say, but I have to say it. It's hard for you to hear, but you have to hear it. We are out of money, and we are out of time. That is why the finance director has proposed a bonding package, now pending before the City Council, that will close out over 20 years of bad management of our capital accounts, double our existing fund balance, and resolve our cash flow problem. By including a clause for the reduction in bonding if state payments are received in time, and by designating any state refund payments received after bonding to a debt service account, this plan would resolve our difficulties, improve our bond rating, and ensure that, combined with the adoption of a good and reasonable budget this year, that the city permanently turns the financial corner. This plan is a last resort, but that is where we are. It has been endorsed by our finance department, supported by our bond counsel, and with the clause for bonding reduction for receipt of state refunds, has the support of the city council's independent financial consultant. The approval of this bonding will address our cash flow situation, but it's not just cash that we don't have enough of. We don't have enough cops on our streets. Graffiti is on the rise. Enforcement of basic broken windows, quality of life issues is lagging. The effects of that neglect will increase exponentially if we do not take remedial action now and begin to hire more officers. And as if this were not enough, our city buildings are falling apart. If we have to plow the streets in a snowstorm, we don't have the manpower to pick up the trash. Without enough manpower for bulky waste collection, couches are now piling up on sidewalks throughout our city. This moment has been a long time coming. 2 years ago, I stood before you and said that New Londoners had not been paying the true cost of their government for quite some time. That in the year I took office, under a budget adopted before I arrived, the city was running a deficit of almost $4 million, and that our fund balance, essential to maintain cash flow, meet payroll, and preserve our bond rating, was nearly exhausted. It was a hard truth. I don't blame anyone for wanting it verified by an independent auditor before they believed me. But these audits have been done, however, and the numbers have been confirmed. Since then, even with tax increases to correct the deficit, we've lost 25% of our municipal employees due to budget cuts. We increased taxes, but not enough to cover what we had been spending by eating up our fund balance while holding taxes artificially low. I understand the adage, do more with less. But there comes a point where you can only do less with less. People don't want icy sidewalks, empty lifeguard chairs, and trash barrels sitting for more than a week. My office is besieged on an almost daily basis with phone calls from people angry about the loss of services. We cannot, as a city, continue like this. If we don't change course, we won't be able to attract investors. Our small businesses will continue to close, and residents who can afford to leave will leave. In this precarious moment, either the city is going to crash, or we're going to come together as a community and fix this once and for all. Tonight, I am presenting a budget that paves the way forward. This budget is not frivolous. It doesn't contain luxuries. It is not ideal. But neither does it put Band-Aids on gaping wounds. It rebuilds departments which have been decimated over the years, and it begins in a small and reasonable way to rebuild our fund balance. The total price tag is not cheap, but I believe the alternative is even more expensive and unacceptable. The largest increase in this budget, accounting for $1.4 million, is in our police department. The City Council has mandated that we increase the number of officers in our department from its current level of 65 to 80, and I agree that 80 officers is a reasonable minimum staffing level. This increase will allow us to have a more visible and active police presence in all our neighborhoods and in our downtown, and will give our existing officers a break from the grueling hours that they've been forced to work. As I've promised, I'm also including funding to honor the previous council's mandate requiring a 4-dog canine unit in our police department. In our public works department, I'm including funding for 12 additional positions. This barely begins to reverse the losses this department has suffered over the years. This budget request, if approved, will raise the total number of field staff in the department from 40 to 49, whereas in fiscal year 2003-04, 10 years ago, Public Works had a field staff of 60. To further underscore the necessity of this increase, consider that we currently don't employ a single municipal plumber, electrician, or painter for the maintenance of all city buildings, and that includes our schools. Our buildings do not look the way they do because of incompetence, bad management, or lack of caring. Deferred maintenance, lack of funding, and lack of staff are causing our buildings to deteriorate, and we need to reverse this trend before we lose these assets altogether. This budget will also accurately balance the fire department budget for the first time in over a decade. I thank Chief Kidd and the members of his department for the continued standard of excellence that they strive to maintain. Their quick response times and hard work under grueling and dangerous conditions have saved buildings, businesses, and lives. Balancing this department's budget will be a significant achievement and will correct one glaring area of past underfunding and overspending. In finance, another department which had suffered little publicized and little understood staffing losses over the years, I'm adding an industrial safety risk manager position. I anticipate that this position will save us much more than it costs us by helping the city to reduce its increasing liabilities. I'm also including funding for a grants coordinator in the Office of Development and Planning. I campaigned on this issue, and I firmly believe that this position will be a good investment, reducing the overall cost of our city's government. A grants coordinator would bring in dozens of times his or her own salary, funding necessities such as vehicle purchases, building maintenance, and street and infrastructure improvements. The budget for the Office of Development and Planning also includes a request for $30,000 for updating our plan of conservation and development, which is mandated by state law. This $30,000 is an initial payment, spreading the total cost of $100,000 out over several years in order to minimize the impact in any one budget year. In my own office, I'm including a $50,000 request for a state-mandated harbor management plan that comes from our newly invigorated Port Authority. Our waterfront, our deep water port, is our city's greatest asset, but without this funding, we'll be unable to fully exploit its potential. I'm also requesting minimal increases in funding for the New London Public Library, Senior Center, and for the Recreation Department. These are important resources for our most valuable residents, run by people who know how to stretch their dollars, but their dollars have been stretched too thin for too long, and some adjustment is needed. But perhaps overall, the most important line in this entire budget is a $500,000 request for fund balance replacement, which our bond rating agencies and financial advisors say we must establish. Even if the bonding ordinance submitted to council is passed and fund balance doubles, it will still only be 25% of what it should be and what the council mandates that it be. If we are not going to institute a supplemental tax, then we need a plan built into our operating budget for total fund balance replacement, or we continue to permanently risk the city's bond rating and cost the city millions of dollars in the long haul. On the education side of the budget, I'm supporting the Board of Ed's reasonable 1.9% increase request. This continues to honor contractual obligations in the education department and stabilizes our education system as it converts to an all-magnet district. All told, my proposed budget for 2014-15 calls for total spending of $87,128,467, an increase of 7.24% over last year. 7.24% is a big increase for 1 year, and I don't enjoy presenting you with this increase. but I want to make several points in order to put this increase in perspective. First, because it comes after several years of deep spending cuts, we would still be spending less under this budget than we spent in the fiscal year ending 2012. My total proposed budget is about $400,000 less than the $87,537,926 we actually spent during the fiscal year ending in the year I took office. This is despite unavoidable increases in contractually mandated obligations and other fixed costs. Second, a 7.24% budget increase does not mean a 7.24% tax increase for all New Londoners. In fact, many New Londoners will see their tax bills go down. This is because we just went through a citywide state-mandated property reevaluation. Most property owners saw their properties lose value considerably. Our taxable grand list went down almost 25%. Even though this budget would require a high mill rate, that mill rate will apply to your new assessment, not your old assessment. Until you compare your assessments, that mill rate is meaningless. To make the situation even more confusing, if you are not confused already, New London's properties did not lose value evenly across the board. Large commercial properties like Electric Boat held their values fairly well. Waterfront residential properties on the south end of town held their values too. On the other hand, residential properties north of the hospital, particularly multifamily houses, lost value significantly. That's bad news if you want to sell your property and your mortgage is underwater, but it's very good news when you get your tax bill. In other words, although I don't wish a tax increase on anyone, this is one of the few times when a regressive property tax increase will fall largely on those with the most progressive ability to pay. Many of the people in our city with the least breathing room in their personal budgets will see their taxes decrease or increase only slightly. Taking a closer look at these numbers, the average New London single-family homeowner's house has dropped in value from $166,000 to $126,000. That average homeowner would see a tax increase of about $38 a month or slightly over $1 a day. But someone on Dart Street, for example, whose average home fell in value from $130,000 to $88,000, would see their taxes drop $5 a month. The average duplex owner in the city would see their taxes drop $23 per month. Multifamily homeowners would see their taxes drop by even more. Meanwhile, most of the downtown commercial property owners would not see a large tax increase. I expect, however, despite this, that my budget proposal will be controversial. A spending increase in combination with property reevaluation isn't easy to understand or to break down, and it isn't fun. I wouldn't be standing here giving you this news if I didn't have to. I will say that if this budget passes without major changes, I won't be coming back next year asking for anything new. This is the budget that pulls us out of the hole, stabilizes our tax rate and our services. This is the budget that signals to potential investors that New London is a good place to start a business or raise a family, that we care about our streets and our schools, and we won't let ourselves die a slow death, or worse, in our political intransigence and inaction at this critical moment, die by suicide. I know, however, as I stand before you, that again I wish I was a native New Londoner. I wish all the people in this city knew my heart and understood my motivations. Too much of the debate in our city for the past 2 years has been focused on me, instead of being focused on the city and its very real and very pressing financial problems. We cannot face the challenges before us if for the next 2 years this political paradigm persists. The city must be put first. I cannot simultaneously lead the city out of this situation, do whatever is necessary, and continue to speak uncomfortable financial truths if every proposal from my administration is perceived as a political maneuver designed to get me reelected. It is for that reason that I have decided that I will not be a candidate for reelection next year, but instead will dedicate myself fully to the task at hand. We all need to do this. We need to put our own interests aside and put our city first. I began this address by saying that after a difficult winter, this spring offers new hope. Well, I check the weather each day and wonder how long it will be until I can mothball my winter coat. Likewise, I wonder how long it will be before our city's hard financial times come to an end. But the analogy only goes so far, because whatever happens or doesn't happen with the weather is up to fate. Whatever happens to New London is up to us. I hope that we're strong and wise enough to come together in this moment. I think that we are. After all, our city is made up of people like Jimmy Diaz Saavedra, for example, who offered to purchase wayfaring signs for the city's parks if the city would install them, and people like Peter Roberts, who show up at 5 a.m. week after week to serve breakfast in a church basement to our indigent fellow New Londoners. It's made up of people like Laura Natush, who led online fundraising efforts to help a New Londoner fix his wheelchair. It's made up of people who volunteer for the Jennings School Block Party, who volunteer at the Senior Center and at Fresh New London, of people who use social media to help save dogs that are at our animal control. And yes, it's made up of people like our Office of Planning and Development Director, Tammy Doherty. Tammy postponed her own cancer treatment surgery in order to finish the work of gaining approvals for the Coast Guard Museum land transfer. Her dedication should serve as a lesson to all of us that we can come together and face any challenge. She is home tonight, recovering from her surgery. She is a fighter. I spoke to her today, and I want her to know that the thoughts and prayers of our entire city go out to her and to her family. Tammy has shown us all how to put personal desires aside for the common good. If we all do the same, if we choose to set aside our political, our personal, and our socioeconomic differences, New London can be stronger than any of us imagined, with a bustling port, world-class schools, revitalized neighborhoods, and a vibrant downtown anchored by the National Coast Guard Museum. We can have all of this. We can be the city we've always known we could be. The signs of our renewal are as abundant as the new roots growing under spring soil. Either they will wither, or else we will choose, in this New London spring, to nurture them, and in so doing, give new life to our city. The renaissance that New Londoners have waited for far too long to see is finally within our reach. Let us have the strength to do what is necessary to make that renaissance a reality. Thank you. God bless you, and God bless New London.